President Barrow says his government is setting up plans to eliminate corruption. United Nations awards Doreen Malambo as Women Police of the Year. U.S. businesses prepare for potential post-election unrest. These and more coming on The World Today. Good evening, you're watching The World Today. I am Sohna Tunkara, and now the news in detail. Corruption in Gambia's public sector is perceived to be very high, especially among the top levels in public institutions. However, President Adama Barrow said on Friday that his government is setting up plans and policies to eliminate corruption practices in government. Fatmata Kasim tells us more.
In an interview with iAfrica TV on Friday, President Barrow said his government plans to eliminate corruption through policies. He said one of the ways corruption will be tackled is through the use of government's e-pay system.
I think my government and the IMS government is just like day and light. What the Mandingas call shoot on in Tilo. Completely different. It's not the same. That's why, because we have taken a lot of measures. It's part of our reforms. Part of the reforms, we now want to eliminate cashiers. We want people to be paying to banks. Now we are going into the e-system. You know that now salaries, we are now paying from PMO, our salaries, because we have migrated to the e-system. Even if you are in the Gambia, you receive your salary as the day President receives his salary, today. Even on your telephone, you can receive salary. So that is efficiency, and that have eliminated corruption. First time you have paymasters going all over, everywhere, going with money and everything. There are a lot of corruption involved in that. We have eliminated all that. First time, even we have to pass through the central bank to pay. Now we don't go to the central bank. We pay direct. And also, there was an audit. The audit also revealed a lot of things. We were paying a lot of money to people who are not working for government. We have eliminated that now. We have saved Gambia a lot of money. So I think this government is very serious about corruption.
However, even as the permanent secretary at the Ministry of Fisheries, Dr. Bamba Banja, was accused of taking bribe and got suspended, President Barrow said it is an isolated case and that it is being dealt with by Commission of Inquiries.
These are isolated cases that have happened. Is unfortunate, but we have set up an inquiries. You know, in a democracy, it's not easy. If democracy was easy, nobody will be encouraged to respect democracy. It's because it's difficult. If it is dictatorship, you can go and arrest people, jail them, you do that. But now you cannot do that. What you do is, you follow due process. The due process is, we have suspended the man concerned, the man who is accused. We are now investigating. After the investigation, then the report comes. That's the time now we will decide what to do.
The Gambia is ranked 96 of 180 countries in Transparency International's 2019 Corruption Perception Index as a score of 37 over 100. This means that the perception of public corruption in government is still very high. Fatmata Kasim, iAfrica TV.
The Gambian leader said his government has introduced e-system to eliminate corruption. Now, since 2013, the 2nd of November has been set aside by the United Nations General Assembly to commemorate the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, as the day is also used to remember the assassination of 2 French journalists in Mali on November 2nd, 2013, and others killed in the line of duty. UN member states are urged to take measures of countering the present culture of impunity. Mariama Cham has the rest of that story.
This landmark resolution condemns all attacks and violence against journalists and media workers. It also urges member states to do their utmost to prevent violence against journalists and media workers, to ensure accountability, bring to justice perpetrators of crimes against journalists and media workers, and ensure that victims have access to appropriate remedies. It further calls upon states to promote a safe and enabling environment for journalists to perform their work independently and without undue interference. Volkan Bozkır, president of the UN General Assembly, said that journalists should be protected at all times. Bozkır also acknowledges the dangers journalists face in executing their work around the globe.
Today, as we mark the International Day to end impunity for crimes against journalists, we must do our utmost to prevent violence against media workers and create a safe and enabling environment for journalists to perform their work independently and without undue interference. We must support those brave individuals who put themselves in often difficult or dangerous situations to get us the information we need, to challenge us to be the voice of the unheard and to hold those in power accountable. It's our job to protect journalists so they can keep doing their job.
The UN General Assembly President also highlighted the important role journalists play in every society. He acknowledges the tremendous work journalists are doing, especially risking their lives gathering information for the public in these trying times of the pandemic.
Journalists play an incredibly important role in our lives, sometimes at great personal risk. They bring us invaluable information from around the world to right here at home. They are the embodiment of free speech, a fundamental pillar of any free and democratic society. During the pandemic, journalists have been on the front lines in the fight to get the truth out. It's critical time for fact-based reporting. With COVID-19, incorrect information can be deadly.
For the past 12 years, more than 1,000 journalists have been killed for reporting the news and bringing information to the public. In 9 out of 10 cases, the killers go unpunished. Impunity leads to more killings and is often a symptom of worsening conflict and the breakdown of law and judicial systems. The UN agency responsible for promoting press freedom and freedom of expression, UNESCO, said in a statement that it is concerned that impunity damages whole societies by covering up serious human rights abuses, corruption and crime. Reporting for African News, I am Mariama Cham.
The world celebrates the end to impunity for crimes against journalists. Now, from that story by Mariama Cham, heading to the U.S. ahead of the elections, shops and businesses in New York City are framed with plywood in preparation for any possible unrest after the November 3rd elections. The move is prompted by a series of protests witnessed in the United States this year over police brutality, according to business people. Details of that in this report.
Workers could be seen carrying plywood, mounting and painting them ahead of Tuesday's presidential election. The plywood boards are used to cover the front of businesses amid fear of any potential vandalism of post-election unrest. Business owners predict tension may erupt after the elections, resulting in protests and riots in New York and other cities. With the Black Lives Matter movement protests and other recent protests that sparked in America, causing destruction of property and looting of shops, 2 New Yorkers who have their shops covered up say they are not taking chances.
We're doing this because there are anarchists. We've had elections for decades and centuries where we haven't had to board things up. But there's a movement in this country that is anarchic, and they're Antifa, they are Black Lives Matter, and they are very hardcore left-wing agitators. And that's why this has to be done.
Looks like people are preparing for possible unrest. Seems very calm today, but kind of quietly tense.
Since it's election time, a passerby says the noise is expected and reaffirms his optimism on Donald Trump's victory.
Yes, because it's an election, there's a lot of amplified noise and volatility around everything right now, but in the short term it'll be a little challenging. But I think as we get closer to the new year, no matter who comes out, we'll just keep moving forward. I think the silent majority with the red is certainly going to take a lot of control, and there's going to be more of a shock, just as much as there was in 2016.
Can I see your hat, though?
In 2016, after Donald Trump was elected, there was a resistance movement that saw almost 52 cities embarking on protests and a few turned violent. Anxiousness is looming widely. The sharp increase in gun sales of recent spiked fear of violence erupting. In September, the incumbent President Trump suggested during a rally that if he loses the election, it's because it was rigged, signaling the act to crack down violence. For iAfrica TV, Sohna Tunkara.
As Americans race to the polls, there is fear of post-election unrest. Now, the United Nations Department of Peace Operations has named the Chief Inspector of the Zambian Police Force as the 2020 United Nations Women Police Officer of the Year. Doreen Malambo, a serving officer in the UN mission in South Sudan, will be presented the award during the 15th United Nations Police Week, which takes place virtually on Tuesday. More of that in this report by Julden Jaisware.
Chief Inspector Malambo currently serves as gender advisor in Juba, South Sudan, where she was first deployed in 2016, a year marked with widespread violence in the country. Malambo witnessed the suffering and devastation firsthand and recalls what happened back then.
I had no direction during the first day of the crisis. And then the second day, of course, we were following the radio announcements. And then when they called upon the ANPO officers to come out and help the South Sudanese who were running through the camp, I was one of the first females to just come out. I didn't even have a protective jacket.
Working with the United Nations Population Fund, she helped establish the Stand Up for Rights of Women and Girls initiative that has helped to reduce and prevent sexual and gender-based crime in South Sudan. As part of this project, Malambo also created a network of groups led by male local police officers to engage other men in the community to disseminate information and to promote the protection and advancements of the rights of women and girls.
When I ended my first mission in South Sudan, that was in 2018, I just stayed 3 months in my country, and I was called back on quick return because of the works which were recognized on the women empowerment.
Her previous UN experience includes a deployment with the United Nations mission in Liberia from 2008 to 2009, where she assisted the Liberia National Police to prevent and investigate sexual and gender-based violence and domestic violence. Her national experience spans 24 years with the Zambia Police Service. The United Nations Woman Police Officer of the Year Award was established in 2011 to recognize the exceptional contribution of women police officers to the UN peace operations and to promote the empowerment of women. This year's award carries a special significance as it marks the 20th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution on Women, Peace and Security, and 60 years since the first deployment of the United Nations Police to the United Nations operation in the Congo. For iAfrica News, I am Julden Yaisware.
From that report, we will now go with a short commercial break and continue with the rest of our stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching The World Today, and now to the rest of our stories. European countries are experiencing a second wave of coronavirus infections, with new cases arising daily. This has forced some European leaders to take drastic measures to stop the spread of the virus. The WHO's Director General, Dr. Tedros, over the weekend called on leaders to intensify efforts to tackle the spread of the virus. Ndesise tells us more.
The long-predicted second wave of the pandemic in Europe has begun as several European countries are reporting more COVID-19 cases than they did during the first wave of the pandemic in March this year. The WHO's Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, has called on leaders to step up and for people to unite in this critical moment.
Countries in Europe and North America continue to spike. This is another critical moment for action, another critical moment for leaders to step up, and another critical moment for people to come together for a common purpose.
According to the WHO, the rise in cases comes after a period of unprecedented lockdowns during the first wave, which had reduced the number of new cases and deaths across the continent. The second wave of infections in Europe is far worse than the first wave, as the continent reported more than 250,000 cases in a single day, according to reports. Speaking to the reporters via a video link from self-isolation after being identified as a contact of someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, Dr. Tedros also advised people to follow health guidelines as a way to prevent the transmission of the virus.
I am well and without symptoms, but will self-quarantine in the coming days in line with WHO protocols. At this time, it's critically important that we all comply with health guidance. This is how we will break chains of transmission, suppress the virus, and protect health systems.
The WHO's technical lead, Dr. Maria Van, also briefed reporters that they are doing contact tracing to suppress the transmission of the pandemic.
Everything that we have put in place, everything that we are recommending to the world, we are putting in place here as well. And so, as Mike has said, we are tracking all of the cases that are happening amongst staff, doing contact tracing forward, doing contact tracing backwards to make sure we understand how people were infected, and making sure that transmission is not taking place.
According to the WHO, Europe does seem to have got a bit relaxed in June and July. Once the numbers began to come down, people started traveling extensively, even for leisure, and this has contributed to the shock the continent is experiencing currently. This has forced many European leaders to take drastic action in order to contain the second wave of the pandemic. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Ndesise.
From that report by Awande Sisi, Europe is experiencing a second wave of the novel coronavirus pandemic. Now heading back home, the leader of the United Democratic Party, Usaini Dabo, on Saturday laid the foundation stone for a political bureau in Sanyang. Accompanied by a huge crowd, the party leader couldn't address the gathering as was initially planned, but he and some UDP parliamentarians and party supporters who were on the ground at Sanyang spoke to iAfrica TV. Details of that in this report.
At Sanyang, the UDP converged a huge crowd to welcome its leader, and iAfrica TV had conversation with UDP parliamentarians and party supporters on the ground. Amongst them was Momodu LK Sane, the deputy speaker, who said UDP is gaining grounds and constituencies in the country are competing to see the establishment of UDP bureau in their areas.
In the life of the political history of United Democratic Party, it's a party that has been formed since 1996, and since then the party is growing from strength to strength. Today is a foundation stone laying of the constituency committee of Kombo Sanyang in the Kombo North constituency. So therefore it's very significant, and the party is gaining momentum, is growing from strength to strength, because really all constituencies in the country now are working towards having a political bureau for United Democratic Party. As a result, That's a significant moment for the party, and it's a big achievement for the party.
The UDP parliamentarian for Kombo East, Lamin NF Konta, said UDP has principles and represents the wishes and aspirations of Gambians, and that transparency and accountability will be a certainty come 2021 when they form the new government.
But the UDP party, the party Miyalongo, is a party of principles.
UDP, it's a party of principles, and they have a vision. They have a mission on which the party is run, and they never relent in that. Anything they are doing, they do it with guiding principles and the way citizens want it. So, on that note, transparency and accountability will be the order of the day come 2021 when the UDP government takes office.
Ami Baji, alias Jola Baji of Lamen, said UDP will defeat President Barrow in the coming elections, and just as Jambe, he too will end in exile.
Yaya is better than Adama, somebody who sacked his father, beat his brothers and insulted your helpers. Your enemies who said you are always sleeping are now your friends. But let him know UDP is the party he came from, and we haven't done much to Yaya Jammeh. We will defeat Barrow in elections, and he will find it difficult to remain here in the Gambia.
The UDP then became part of the opposition alliance known as Coalition 2016, but after its leader was sacked by Barrow, it went back to its position as the main opposition party in the country. It is preparing grounds for the 2021 elections with its leader, the possible candidate for presidency. For iAfrica TV, I am Omar Ahmadou Toure.
UDP party shows optimism for 2021 elections. From that report by Omar Toure. Now, Somali women are calling more support to increase their participation in politics ahead of next month's parliamentary election. Despite the country's prime minister's commitment to widen women's participation in politics, others have expressed concerns on the lack of guarantees. The United Nations has also joined the fray of encouraging the government to support women participation in politics. More of that in this report.
At his confirmation hearing in September, Somali Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble reiterated his administration plans to support more women representation in politics.
I have made it clear, the quota for women must be guaranteed. I have received calls from all sectors of the society urging me to ensure that women receive their fair share of representation.
However, Somali women have expressed concerns of a deliberate attempt to lock them out of the upcoming polls, comments shared by rights groups and various advocacy organizations.
The government and parliament have vowed to support the quota for women, but that is not enough. We want a law put in place that will allow a woman to be given a seat in any constituency that has at least 3 representatives in parliament. The president and prime minister must work to endorse it, or else women will continue to be sidelined in politics.
Meanwhile, as the country plans to hold parliamentary elections next month, the United Nations has joined other rights groups in pressuring leaders to ensure women are not sidelined.
We urge all of Somalia's leaders to continue to collaborate in this manner with the preparations for the national elections so that they are underpinned by transparency, fairness, and inclusivity. This will include ensuring that the 30% quota for women's representation in the parliamentary elections is achieved.
At the federal level, women lawmakers account for 24% in both Parliament and the Senate. Advocacy groups are now warning that massive corruption will likely affect the outcome of the polls. The public will have no say in the process once again, as leaders fail to agree on how to conduct a popular vote, a move analysts say will have given marginalized sectors of the society a fair chance at seeking elective positions.
Now, as the number of COVID-19 cases continue to rise in Kenya, some hospitals are installing adequate oxygens to support patients in critical conditions. Considering its critical role in supporting COVID-19 patients, authorities are devising means to provide oxygen in different health facilities across the country. The World Health Organization has encouraged other countries, to emulate the Kenyan approach in dealing with the virus.
Oxygen is critical in the provision of emergency care.
and seriously ill COVID-19 patients risk death if the gas is not available in hospitals or smaller health facilities. In Kenyan hospitals, lack of oxygen is more often the norm rather than the exception, and where it is available, it's usually too expensive, a cost that is passed to the patient. Many private hospitals charge about $20 per hour, which means medical bills run into thousands of US if the patient has been on oxygen support continuously for a month. And given the importance of oxygen in the management of COVID-19, the World Health Organization has added it to the list of essential medicines that hospitals must have. The WHO recently lauded some Kenyan hospitals for installing gas plants. Anthony Chwoni, a biomedical engineer at Kenyatta University Hospital, says installing a gas plant is not only cost-effective, but it is also essential if many lives are to be saved.
All along, we supply the oxygen 24/7. So at any given time, our hospital will never lack any oxygen, which is a key fighting component for the COVID-19 patient. Most of the patients require oxygen therapy.
Mainstream hospitals relying on vendors to supply oxygen are spending an average of $100,000 a month on it, according to some sources. But for those that have invested hundreds of thousands of US into gas plants, they have enough oxygen for their needs and excess to support other hospitals. Kenyatta University Hospital is now supporting neighboring hospitals during the pandemic.
We have 4 units. One unit can supply or produce oxygen 414 liters per hour. So if you multiply them times 4, it gives you like around 2,400, 500 liters per hour.
Kenyatta University Hospital has been on the forefront in the fight against COVID-19 here in Kenya. And doctors at this facility maintain that this plant has been a lifesaver.
So eventually we save a lot, not in terms of monitoring, but also saving the nation. As we don't count it as a monitoring issue, but how many people benefit from it.
WHO now wants more African countries to borrow a leaf from Kenya, even as the number of reported cases continue to rise across the continent.
Well, viewers, from that report ends today's World News Bulletin. Gambia 24 is up next with Mariama Cham. Until then, good evening.